Hi, my name is Greg Wilson. I'm the minister for Redeemer Church in Chorlton, Manchester. We're a church that loves Jesus, that loves people, and is cultivating the rich culture of our neighborhood. We created this mini video series for this reason. We don't want anyone to miss out on God. We don't want anyone to miss out on His joy, on His love, on the new life that He gives. God is always singing His love over us, and this just might be a time where you'll have ears to hear it. This series is in 4 parts, so if you haven't started from the beginning, go ahead and have a look. And it all comes from a verse in the Old Testament, from a book named after the prophet Zephaniah. It's found in verse 17 of chapter 3, and I'll just read it for us. It says, "The Lord your God is with you, a mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In His love He will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing." We don't want anyone missing out on what that means in their life. So if you want to learn more about this after watching these videos, or if you want someone to pray for you, or if you just have questions about the Christian faith, even if you have rants, we're open to talk to you about them and to listen to those rants. You can go to redeemermcr.com/connect-card and we can get in touch. Let's talk about number 2, God's power. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. The mighty warrior who saves. That's power. God is just not, He's not just impotently present. He's not present and doesn't have a whole lot of power. He is there in His power. God is a mighty warrior. Now, when I think of a warrior, the first image that comes into my head is a Viking. I'm a little bit of a Viking kind of nerd. I'm kind of obsessed with Vikings. I just think they're fascinating. I mean, very few people will listen a few times to a 20-plus hour audio lecture on Vikings, but this guy will because he finds a strange fascination with Vikings. A Viking, though, is not really what God is like, because a Viking is out for himself. A Viking pillages, a Viking destroys, a Viking burns places down and kills people. They grab land for themselves. Not so with God, because God is not a warrior out to conquest things for himself, because He already has everything. Here in Zephaniah, God is a warrior for us to save. He doesn't need to save Himself. He needs to save us. That's what God is a warrior for. He's for us. Now, a warrior wars against others. So who is God against? He doesn't just fight the air. Who is God fighting? Who is God against? God is against everything that holds us back. Everything that holds us back from experiencing the life that He has planned for us, which is an enjoyable life, a good life, a one where we experience joy in all things. That means ourselves, the flesh that we have, where we're do the things we don't want to do, or when we do the things that bring on guilt, do the things that bring on shame, all those things that hold us back. God is warring against that. He's against the world, all of the things that can come in from the world and come in and get at us. God is against those things. He's for us. And even the devil himself, the dark spiritual forces that are at work in this world, as much as God is, although God is obviously much stronger than that, but dark spiritual forces are there set against us. God is a warrior against all of those things. He's against everything that holds us back. So if God is against these things, how can they succeed? There's no way they can succeed. Have you ever been depressed or shame-ridden or guilt-ridden or full of disgrace because you got a glimpse of your own sinfulness? How about during this lockdown? You know, I've heard when doing marriage counseling, and especially after people get married and have lived together for a year, I've heard people describe that as a mirror for their own sinfulness. Or when we have kids, it's the same kind of thing. It's like, oh man, I thought I was pretty sinful, and then I had a kid, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with myself. I think there's some similarities there with this lockdown. I think we realize actually how self-obsessed we can tend towards without even thinking about it, just kind of on autopilot. And not just selfish, but we probably have also realized how over busy we are, or how much we might have depended on all those kind of external things that are nice but not necessary for our lives in order to escape that silence within us that we find uncomfortable. But God is a warrior for us. We aren't left to ourselves to deal with our guilt. And guilt says, I did something bad. to deal with our shame. Shame says, I am something bad. As heavy as our brokenness might feel, nothing can stand in the way of this mighty warrior. Nothing. Because it says here that he saves. He's not for destroying us. He's for saving us. That's what God is doing. That's what he's about. I think this is amazing. And I know you've probably heard this before. This is not, for most of you who are believers or you've been around the church for a while, this is probably not a new concept. But stop 1 second. Some of us might believe it. Others might think it too good to be true. But even for those of us who do believe it, nobody lives their life 100% of the day as if this is true. Nobody does. And I know this because I know that you, like me, tend to rely on yourself. If you rely on yourself, you actually do not believe that God is who he says he is here. You don't believe that he's with you and that he's strong enough to overcome whatever the thing might be. If you're relying on yourself, you're saying, God isn't good enough, I must figure it out. Remember our fantasy world, right? God isn't around, or at least we're on default, God isn't around. And if he's not around, I have to work for it myself. I have to work hard first, then maybe pray to kind of baptize my hard work, instead of it being the other way around. If you're worried and anxious, it might be because you're relying on you to fix your problems. You can't. You are not good enough. You're not powerful enough. You cannot do it. That's why you have anxiety and worry. No wonder there's an epidemic of anxiety in a time where you're trying to erase the existence of God altogether. Why would we rest in our own strength when we have a mighty saving warrior working for our good? I mean, do you feel now how ridiculous it is to rely on yourself? I am. I'm finding that quite ridiculous right now. What if other parts of our lives would come under this reality? What would that look like? Mature faith is growing in our dependence on God and relying on him more. Mature faith lives in the real world, and the real world is one where God is present and he is powerful. So how do we rely on this powerfully present God? How can we do that? Well, we need to hear his words to us, which is the Bible. We need to hear these words coming in all the time. God is always speaking to us. God is never not speaking to us. These are his words. Have you ever thought, I wonder what God's like, or I wonder what God thinks about, I wonder what God cares about, or, I guess we'll never know. I guess it's just a mystery. Like, we have a book. The words are here. We can actually read it. Or maybe you've had a thought or even like said something like, oh man, if God would just write in the sky what he wants me to do, or what he wants us humans to do, man, it would just be so easy, then we would believe. God's like, I've given you a book. Read the words. They're in here. Just read these words. You don't have to look up to the sky. It's right here. It's scandalously easy. These are words we need to hear. So we need God's words to us. Also, we need to speak our words to God, aka prayer. Because God is not a thing. God is not a program. God is not some event in a building. He's a person. And learning about him is one way to know, but learning from being in relationship with him, that's something altogether different. Something altogether different. Speaking to God, which is called prayer, doesn't need to be grand, doesn't need to use big theological words, or even have an end in mind. It could just be, God, I'm tired right now. And that's the prayer. It could just be, God, I feel worried. Will you help me? Or it could just be, thanks. That's all it can be to begin with. God's words to us and our words to God. Like, that sounds really simple. And it is. It's very easy. It's also powerful because this allows us to rid ourselves of the fantasy lives that we hold on to and allows us to reconnect to the reality that God is there and he's powerfully present for us. So that's our second word, power. Power. In this next section, we'll look at joy. So thanks for watching the second installment. If you'd like to grow more on depending on God in your life, depending on God's power, or if you just need prayer for something, you can reach out at redeemermcr.com/connect card. We're happy to help. We can get in touch.